Hey besties, before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching from. Whether it's sunrise in Jamaica, midnight in California, afternoon in Paris, or evening in South Africa. I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. The brass doorknob clicked for the last time behind 17-year-old Seraphina Blackwood. Her stepmother, Vivienne, stood in the doorway of their Victorian mansion on Thornfield Avenue, her emerald dress catching the amber glow of the porch light. The wind bit through Seraphina's thin cotton sweater as she clutched a single worn duffel bag, its fabric frayed from years of her father's construction site visits. "You're no longer welcome in this house," Vivienne's voice cut through the October night like shattered glass. Her perfectly manicured fingers gripped the door frame until her knuckles turned white. Behind her, the warm golden light of the foyer illuminated family portraits that no longer included Seraphina's face. "Your father left you nothing but debt and disappointment. I refuse to carry that burden any longer." Seraphina's breath formed small clouds in the frigid air, each exhale visible in the streetlight's harsh glare. The scent of dying leaves mixed with her stepmother's expensive perfume, a fragrance that once meant safety, now twisted into something cold and final. Behind Vivienne, the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11 times, its deep brass voice echoing through rooms that had once been filled with laughter. "Please," Seraphina whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind rustling through the massive oak trees that lined their street. Her fingers were already numb from the cold, but she couldn't feel anything except the crushing weight of abandonment. Vivienne's lips curved into a smile as cold as the October air. Her gray eyes reflected nothing but contempt. The woman who had once braided Seraphina's hair and helped with homework now looked at her like she was a stranger. "That's no longer my concern, darling. You're 18 tomorrow, technically an adult. Figure it out." The heavy wooden door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the empty street like a gunshot. Standing alone under the flickering streetlight, Seraphina felt the first tear freeze on her cheek. The mansion behind her went dark, room by room, until even her old bedroom window showed nothing but black glass. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, her face would be on every television screen in the country, and the woman who cast her out would be watching in stunned silence. 3 years earlier, Thornfield Avenue had been paradise wrapped in the smell of fresh coffee and sawdust. Seraphina remembered racing down the marble staircase each morning, her father's booming laughter echoing through the high-ceiling rooms like music. Theodore Blackwood had been a gentle giant with calloused hands from his work as a construction foreman and eyes that crinkled like wrapping paper when he smiled at his daughter's architectural sketches. "My little architect," he'd call her, watching as 14-year-old Seraphina sketched impossible buildings in her notebook during their Sunday morning pancake breakfast. The smell of sawdust clung to his work clothes even after showers, mixing with the aroma of fresh coffee brewing in their sunny yellow kitchen. Their breakfast table was always covered with blueprint fragments and measuring tools, father and daughter planning dream houses between bites of syrup-soaked pancakes. Everything changed when Vivienne appeared at the Harvest Festival like something from a fairy tale. She glided through the crowd in a sapphire dress that shimmered under the string lights, her platinum hair catching autumn sunlight like spun silver. Theodore stood frozen at the pie booth, a 45-year-old widower suddenly transformed into a stuttering teenager. Seraphina watched her father's weathered face change as Vivienne's painted smile turned toward him, her voice like honey and promises. "She's beautiful, isn't she, sweetheart?" Theodore had whispered, his rough palm resting on Seraphina's shoulder with the trembling weight of a man discovering love for the second time. His wedding ring, her mother's ring, suddenly felt heavy on his finger. The wedding happened 6 months later in the garden behind their house, white roses blooming along the cobblestone pathway like hope made visible. Seraphina wore a yellow dress and tried to smile as her father promised his life to a woman who barely acknowledged her existence. Vivienne's laugh tinkled like expensive crystal throughout the ceremony, but her gray eyes remained cold as winter stone whenever they landed on her stepdaughter. The first cracks appeared during their Hawaiian honeymoon, when Seraphina found unpaid bills scattered across the kitchen table like autumn leaves, each envelope stamped with red warnings. The funeral roses had barely wilted when Vivienne's true nature emerged from behind her widow's veil. Theodore's sudden heart attack had left them alone in the vast house, the silence heavy as a burial shroud and twice as suffocating. Seraphina clutched her father's favorite flannel shirt, the fabric still holding traces of sawdust and Old Spice cologne, while her stepmother sorted through legal documents with surgical precision, her movements sharp and calculating. "The business is drowning in debt," Vivienne announced over their first dinner alone, her fork clicking against the fine china like a countdown timer. The dining room felt cavernous without Theodore's warm presence filling the spaces between words. Seraphina pushed food around her plate. The roast beef tasted like cardboard in her mouth. The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the mahogany table where she'd once spread homework while Theodore reviewed construction plans, his pencil scratching calculations in the margins. Now, the table felt like an ocean separating her from the woman who was supposed to be her family. "We'll have to make sacrifices," Vivienne continued, her voice sharp as the silver knives arranged beside their plates. "Your college fund will cover the immediate debts, and we'll need to discuss your future arrangements." The pause before future arrangements hung in the air like a threat. The words hit Seraphina like physical blows, each syllable crushing another piece of her dreams, her plans to study architecture, to follow in her father's footsteps but with formal training, crumbled like sandcastles at high tide. That night, she pressed her ear to the heating vent and heard Vivienne on the phone, her voice drifting through the walls like poison gas. "Yes, I know what Theodore promised her, but things have changed dramatically. The girl will have to understand that reality doesn't care about dead men's promises." Slowly, methodically, Vivienne began to erase Theodore's presence from their home. His photographs disappeared from mantelpieces and side tables. His tools vanished from the garage workshop. Even his favorite coffee mug, the chipped blue one that read "World's Best Dad," found its way to the donation pile. But Seraphina managed to save one precious thing, her father's old smartphone, hidden beneath her mattress like a secret treasure. Winter descended on Thornfield Avenue like a punishment from an angry god, coating everything in ice and emptiness. The heating bills went unpaid, leaving the mansion cold as a tomb, while her stepmother claimed the insurance money was tied up in complex legal proceedings. Seraphina wore layers of sweaters and her father's old work jackets, while her stepmother draped herself in expensive furs, her breath forming clouds even inside the house. "You'll need to find work immediately," Vivienne declared one morning, ice crystals forming elaborate patterns on the kitchen windows like nature's cruel artwork. "I've arranged an interview at Morrison's hardware store downtown." She slid a business card across the table with the same enthusiasm she might show for arranging a funeral. Seraphina found herself sorting screws and measuring lumber with small hands that reminded Mrs. Morrison of someone familiar. The elderly owner had graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-framed glasses, and she recognized something special in the quiet girl who handled construction materials like they were precious artifacts. "She had your father's eye for building," she said one afternoon, watching Seraphina organize inventory with mathematical precision. During long winter evenings, while Vivienne attended social gatherings that no longer included a stepdaughter, Seraphina studied blueprints and building codes using the store's internet connection. Her fingers traced architectural drawings while snow fell outside the windows, each line teaching her the language her father had spoken fluently. She began sketching designs for low-cost housing, structures that could help families like the ones she'd seen sleeping in cardboard shelters near downtown. The revelation came by accident while organizing Theodore's old papers in the dusty attic. Hidden behind Christmas decorations and forgotten photo albums, Seraphina discovered copies of patent applications written in her father's careful handwriting. The documents detailed a revolutionary construction technique for earthquake-resistant buildings, complete with detailed diagrams and stress calculations. They were signed and dated, but never filed, as if Theodore had lost confidence in his own genius. In the margins, he'd written notes in fading pencil, "For Sarah's future,
for people who need safe homes they can afford. Her hands trembling with excitement and grief, Seraphina photographed every page with his hidden phone. The patents were still valid, still revolutionary, still hers by right of inheritance. But more importantly, they were her father's final gift, a blueprint for helping the world one family at a time. Spring brought no warmth to Thornfield Avenue, only the cruel promise of hope that never materialized. Vivienne's demands grew sharper with each passing day, her voice cutting through the house like broken glass being ground underfoot. "The mortgage is 3 months behind," she announced one gray morning, throwing legal papers across the kitchen table like confetti from a nightmare celebration. "We need to sell this house immediately or face foreclosure." But Seraphina had spent months working in secret, using every spare moment at Morrison hardware store to research patent law, architectural firms, and housing development companies. Her father's earthquake-resistant design wasn't just innovative, it represented a complete revolution in construction technology that could save thousands of lives in disaster-prone areas around the world. The mathematics were elegant, the engineering was sound, and the potential impact was staggering. She'd also discovered something else during her late-night research sessions, a competition sponsored by the National Architecture Foundation. The challenge was to design affordable housing solutions for earthquake zones with specific requirements that matched her father's patents perfectly. The winner would receive $100,000 in prize money and mentorship from leading architects at the country's most prestigious firms.
Late at night, by the light of a single desk lamp in the hardware store's back office, Seraphina refined her father's designs with the precision of a master craftsman. She calculated load-bearing requirements, studied foundation systems that could withstand seismic activity, and created detailed blueprints that combined Theodore's practical construction knowledge with cutting-edge engineering principles she'd learned from online courses and technical manuals. Mrs. Morrison found her asleep at the store's drafting table one morning, pencil still clutched in her fingers like a weapon against poverty, the desk covered with architectural drawings that looked like they belonged in a university classroom. "Child, what are you working on?" she asked gently, her voice filled with the kind of concern that had been missing from Seraphina's life for months. When Seraphina explained the project, the patents, the competition, the dream of continuing her father's work, tears formed in Mrs. Morrison's weathered eyes. "Your father would be so incredibly proud," she whispered, studying the intricate drawings with growing amazement. "But you can't complete this alone. The technical requirements are beyond what one person can handle." That's when Mrs. Morrison revealed her own secret. Before opening the hardware store, she'd been a civil engineer for 30 years, specializing in seismic construction. Together, they began refining the designs, perfecting every detail for submission. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday that felt like the end of the world, delivered by a sheriff's deputy who couldn't meet Seraphina's eyes. Vivienne held the legal document with hands that shook like autumn leaves in a windstorm, her perfect composure finally cracking like expensive porcelain dropped on concrete. 30 days, she whispered, her voice hollow like an empty cathedral, all her elegant pretenses stripped away by the harsh reality of unpaid debts. Seraphina found her stepmother that evening in the living room, surrounded by photo albums and empty wine bottles. The elegant woman now looked fragile and defeated. For the first time since Theodore's funeral, Vivienne appeared human rather than simply cruel. The expensive mask had slipped completely, revealing something desperate and frightened underneath all the designer clothes and bitter words. "I never wanted this to happen," she admitted, her words slurred with grief and alcohol, tears creating dark streaks through her carefully applied makeup. "I loved him too, you know. Your father was the kindest man I'd ever met, but love doesn't pay mortgages and kindness doesn't cover medical bills or business debts." She gestured weakly at the foreclosure notice lying between them like an accusation. The confession hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Seraphina sat beside her stepmother on the velvet sofa where she'd once cuddled with her father during movie nights, sharing popcorn and dreams of the future. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner,
marking time toward their inevitable separation with mechanical indifference. "There's something you should know," Vivienne continued, staring at Theodore's portrait above the fireplace with eyes that held regret like prisoners hold on to hope. "He left you more than debt and broken dreams. There's a letter in his safe, sealed and addressed to you. I never gave it to you because—" She voice broke completely, shattering like crystal hitting stone. "Because I was afraid you'd leave me too, and I couldn't bear to lose the last connection to him." The letter, written in Theodore's careful handwriting on his company letterhead, revealed his final gift, not just the patents, but his absolute faith in his daughter's abilities to change the world. "You have the mind of an engineer and the heart of a dreamer. Use both to build a better world than the one I'm leaving behind." That night, Seraphina submitted her competition entry through the hardware store's computer. The title read, "The Blackwood Foundation System, Earthquake-Resistant Housing for Tomorrow." 3 days later, everything fell apart when Vivienne discovered the missing money. The fight erupted over breakfast on a gray October morning that felt heavy with unspoken accusations. Steam rose from Seraphina's coffee mug like ghosts of better times as Vivienne slammed bank statements across the kitchen table with enough force to rattle the fine china. "The account is completely empty," she announced, her voice as sharp as winter wind cutting through bare branches. Seraphina's heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird, desperate for freedom. She'd been so careful, so secretive about her project expenses over the past months. The blueprint printing, research materials, technical consultation fees, and computer usage at various internet cafes. It had all seemed like small amounts individually, but together they'd created a financial disaster she hadn't anticipated. "You stole from this family," Vivienne accused, her gray eyes blazing with fury that seemed to fill the entire kitchen with electricity. "While I've been desperately trying to save this house, working extra shifts at the gallery, selling jewelry and furniture, you've been playing architect with money we desperately needed for survival." Her voice rose with each word until it became a scream that seemed to shake the very foundations of their crumbling home. "It was for the competition," Seraphina whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind rattling the windows like skeleton fingers demanding entry. "Dad's patents, his designs, they could help so many people. The prize money would solve everything." She reached across the table desperately, trying to bridge the growing chasm between them with trembling hands. "Your father's fantasies died with him," Vivienne screamed, shattering the morning quiet like a gunshot, causing the crystal vase on the windowsill to tremble dangerously. Outside, autumn leaves scattered across the empty street like abandoned hopes. And Seraphina could taste salt from tears she didn't remember beginning to shed. "I was trying to help our family," she pleaded, standing now and reaching toward her stepmother with shaking hands that had spent countless hours perfecting architectural drawings. But Vivienne stepped back as if her touch would burn her skin, her face twisted with a mixture of rage and heartbreak that had been building for months. "Help? You've destroyed everything we had left. Pack your things immediately. You have exactly 1 hour to get out of my house." The word hour echoed through the mansion like a death sentence. 60 minutes to abandon the only home she'd ever known. The duffel bag felt heavier with each step down Thornfield Avenue, its worn straps cutting into Seraphina's shoulders like reminders of everything she was leaving behind. Her breath formed white clouds in the October cold as streetlights flickered on like dying stars, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for her with grasping fingers. Behind her, the Victorian mansion stood dark, except for one lit window, Vivienne's red room, where Vivienne watched from behind lace curtains like a ghost haunting her own home. The city bus arrived with a mechanical wheeze and a smell of diesel fuel, its doors opening with a hydraulic sigh to reveal harsh fluorescent lighting and empty seats covered in faded blue fabric. The driver, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying temples, looked genuinely concerned when Seraphina fumbled for change with fingers numb from cold and emotional shock.
"Rough night, honey?" she asked gently, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who'd seen too many young people running from situations they couldn't control. When Seraphina nodded silently, unable to trust her voice not to break completely, the driver waved away the fare. "This one's on me, sweetheart. Sometimes we all need a little kindness from strangers." The bus lurched forward through increasingly rough neighborhoods, carrying her away from everything familiar towards an uncertain future. Through smudged windows streaked with rain, she watched her old life disappear into darkness, while neon signs buzzed and flickered over closed shops and empty storefronts. Groups of teenagers huddled in doorways, their faces hard with survival wisdom Seraphina never needed to learn, their eyes following the bus with the calculating gaze of those who understood desperation. Downtown, the streets grew rougher and more dangerous with each block. Broken glass glittered under streetlights like scattered diamonds, and the smell of urban decay mixed with the distant aroma of fast food and exhaust fumes. She clutched her bag tighter, feeling her father's hidden phone pressing against her ribs through the fabric like a lifeline to better times. The homeless shelter on Pine Street was full, its lobby packed with families and individuals seeking refuge from the cold night. A tired social worker with coffee-stained scrubs and exhausted eyes shook her head apologetically when Seraphina approached the intake desk. "We have a waiting list 3 pages long, sweetheart. Try the youth center on Morrison Street, but they're probably full too." As midnight approached, Seraphina found herself in Riverside Park, sitting on a bench beneath a broken streetlight while the river whispered secrets in the darkness, and she tried to understand how her life had collapsed so completely in just one day. Dawn broke gray and cold over Riverside Park, painting the sky in shades of despair and exhaustion. Seraphina woke to the sound of her father's old phone buzzing insistently inside her duffel bag, the vibration seeming impossibly loud in the morning quiet. Her body ached from sleeping on the wooden bench, every muscle protesting the night spent exposed to October's bite, and dew had soaked through her thin sweater until her skin felt clammy and cold. She almost ignored the call. Unknown numbers usually meant trouble, and she'd had enough trouble to last several lifetimes. But something about the persistent ringing reminded her of her father's voice calling her down for breakfast on better mornings. So she answered with fingers that trembled from more than just cold. "Is this Seraphina Blackwood?" The voice was crisp and professional, but tinged with an excitement that seemed to vibrate through the phone's small speaker. In the background, she could hear office sounds, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the busy hum of important people doing important work. "Yes," she whispered, her throat raw from the cold night air and crying she barely remembered. Around her, the park was slowly awakening, early joggers passing by with rhythmic footsteps, birds calling from the maple trees, the distant sound of morning traffic beginning its daily symphony. "This is Patricia Chen from the National Architecture Foundation. I'm calling about your competition entry, the Blackwood Foundation System." She paused, and she could hear papers rustling with official importance. "Miss Blackwood, I need you to sit down. You've won. Your design isn't just innovative, it's revolutionary. The judges were unanimous in their decision." The words hit like lightning, striking twice in the same place, sending electricity through every nerve in her body. Seraphina sat up straighter on the bench, her heart pounding so hard she was sure joggers 3 blocks away could hear it. Everything seemed impossibly bright suddenly. The morning sun breaking through clouds, the river sparkling like scattered jewels, even the cracked pavement beneath her feet looking beautiful and full of possibility. "There's more," Patricia continued, her voice growing more excited with each word. "CNN wants to interview you this afternoon about your earthquake-resistant housing design. They're particularly interested in your story. A 17-year-old who lost her father but found the courage to continue her revolutionary work. The human interest angle is extraordinary. Can you be at our downtown office at 2 o'clock sharp?" Seraphina looked down at her wrinkled clothes, her nearly empty bag, her reflection in the river's surface showing a girl who looked like she'd been sleeping rough. I I don't have anywhere to get ready or proper clothes for television. The admission felt like another small defeat in a life that contained too many already. At exactly 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Vivienne sat alone in the living room of the empty Thornfield mansion, surrounded by moving boxes labeled with black marker and memories she couldn't bring herself to pack away. The eviction was final. Tomorrow morning, she'd hand over the keys to the bank representative and leave forever carrying nothing but suitcases and regrets. She reached for the TV remote with hands that trembled like autumn leaves, seeking some distraction from the crushing weight of her failures. The CNN logo filled the screen, followed by breaking news graphics and then a face that stopped her heart completely. Seraphina sat across from a professional interviewer in a television studio, wearing a navy blue blazer that made her look older, more confident, transformed from the broken girl who left just 24 hours earlier. Her dark hair was styled professionally, and her eyes held a composure that reminded Vivienne painfully of Theodore's quiet strength. The Blackwood Foundation System could revolutionize construction in earthquake-prone regions around the world, Seraphina explained to the interviewer, her voice steady and sure, filled with technical knowledge that belonged in engineering classrooms. My father always believed that good shelter was a basic human right, not a luxury reserved for the wealthy. His designs can provide that security at a fraction of traditional construction costs. Behind Seraphina, the screen filled with architectural drawings and patent documents, Theodore's work, refined and perfected into something that looked like the future of affordable housing. The interviewer announced details that made Vivienne's head spin: a $100,000 prize, partnerships with major construction companies, engineering firms fighting over consulting contracts, and international humanitarian organizations already requesting designs for disaster relief housing. At 17, you're already changing the world, the interviewer said, leaning forward with genuine admiration. What's next for you and the Blackwood Foundation? The camera zoomed closer, showing Seraphina's face filled with determination and something else. Forgiveness, perhaps, or simply the quiet strength that comes from surviving abandonment and choosing hope anyway. Seraphina smiled then, the same gentle expression Theodore used to wear when he talked about building homes for families who needed them most. I want to establish manufacturing facilities in earthquake zones, creating jobs while producing affordable housing components. My father taught me that construction isn't just about buildings, it's about creating safe spaces where people can grow, dream, and build better futures for their children. Vivienne's phone rang suddenly, then again, then continuously as neighbors, friends, and strangers began recognizing the girl from Thornfield Avenue, the girl she'd thrown away like yesterday's newspaper, who had somehow transformed rejection into revolution in less than 24 hours. As the interview concluded, Seraphina looked directly into the camera with eyes that held no anger, only quiet triumph. I want to thank everyone who believed in this project, especially Mrs. Morrison from Morrison's Hardware, who helped me when I had nowhere else to turn. 3 weeks later, Seraphina returned to Thornfield Avenue not as a homeless teenager, but as the founder and CEO of Blackwood Housing Solutions, riding in a company car and wearing the confidence that comes from proving everyone wrong about your worth. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the people who throw us away are the ones who need us most. What time is it where you're watching? Drop a comment and let me know. I read every single one.